Hello, this is Dr. Feast Price, and with this phase of our lecture, this week we will talk about task, psychoeducational, and psychotherapy groups and rehabilitation and mental health settings. The objectives for this week is to identify and discuss the different types of groups. Specifically, we'll look at task, psychoeducational, and psychotherapy groups, and we will explore these groups in mental health and rehabilitation settings. Over this week, the lecture will be divided into multiple mini lectures, but for the purpose of this lecture, we'll focus on task or work groups. So what are task or work groups? These are groups that comprise of individuals that are brought together to accomplish a specific action or produce a product. So it's people that are coming together with a particular goal in mind, and at the end of the group, they want to achieve a particular purpose. So sometimes it might be a work group that's working on a grant, or it might be a group of concerned individuals that are coming together to meet with a constituency to ensure that adequate services or resources are being made available. But whatever the task or work group that is in place, it's always a group of individuals that come together because there are particular issues that are of paramount importance that are shared among the group members, and there's a particular outcome that the group is focused on. We recognize that running an effective task or work group takes many different kinds of skills, and we'll talk about some of those skills, which includes the 5 C's of task and work groups. I really like the 5 C's. I believe in them. I think they're very critical and important to task and work groups, but I also think that the 5 C's are important in any kind of group setting. So whether it be a task group, psychoeducational group, or a psychotherapy group, the 5 C's are extremely important. So I'd like for you to keep these in mind, irrespective of the kind of groups you're working with, because I think if you focus on the 5 C's, you'll never go wrong. And they're also consistent with some of the information we've learned previously as it relates to the different stages or the different processes associated with the group context. The 5 C's include control, conflict, communication, consensus, and cohesion. And we'll be unpacking each of these 5 C's in greater detail in a little bit. So the 5 C's are extremely important, and they can either make or break a task group experience. So without control, conflict resolution, effective communication, consensus that's shared among the group members, and cohesiveness, it's very unlikely that the group or the purpose of the group will be effective. So let's just talk a little bit about the importance of the 5 C's. The 5 C's, as we said before, can either make or break a task group experience or any group experience. They're interrelated and interconnected. All can influence members' satisfaction, as well as the level of success that the group will attain in the group process. So, as we mentioned already, if the 5 C's are not appropriately present in the group context, it is highly unlikely that the goals of the group will be accomplished. So as we look at the 5 C's with greater clarity, with more specificity, we recognize the first C is control. And when we speak of control, we know that it's critical to a group to feel goal-oriented and purposeful. So when you have a group, it's not enough to have weekly meetings where people are in attendance, but there has to be a particular goal. What's the purpose? What is the goal of the group? It requires that you have an agenda, that it's structured meetings, and that you're task-oriented. So for each group, there are specific items on the agenda that you want to achieve. So it's very purposeful, very structured, and very goal-oriented. The leader has a shared sense of governance with the members. So there might be one particular person of the group that is the leader. However, every person in the group has a shared sense of purpose and responsibility and governance of what takes place in the task or work group context. Also, the goals are established collaboratively. So rather than in other types of group whereby the facilitator comes in with specific kinds of goals that they want to achieve, particularly if it's an anger management group or some other kind of didactic group, the group facilitator typically comes in with specific goals that they want to achieve with the various therapeutic sessions that are available. However, with the task or work group, the goals are established collaboratively by the group members, and so everyone buys into the group process. Additionally, with regard to control, the leader or leaders are often responsible for convening the meetings, chairing the discussions, and facilitating the process of meeting the goals. So if they're recognizing that the group members are getting stuck, then they remind the members of the purpose of the group and try to move the process forward. They're the ones that are always ensuring that the subsequent meeting is set, that the agenda is laid out, that everyone has contributed to the agenda of the meeting. So the chair has a very important role in ensuring that all members of the group is heard, and that they all have a shared voice in whatever the outcome or the goal is or goals are for the group process. As it relates to conflict, we know that in any group process, the extent to which the group can be successful is extremely limited if there is conflict. So really it's important that you have a leader in the group process that knows how to minimize conflict and to get the group going in such a way that it's productive. So it begins with establishing group rules, asking all the group members, what are the rules for the group? And so there is a consensus and cohesiveness around establishing what the group rules and norms are. There's also the dissemination of tasks and assignments. And so while there is always a group leader or leaders, an effective group leader will ensure that there is buy-in and involvement from other members. So assignments might be divvied out. Some persons might have to make telephone calls. Some people make copies. Some persons might be responsible for various kinds of responsibilities within the group so that everybody has a shared responsibility. It's more of a shared governance in the group process. There's also a lot of open-ended questions that are being asked so that everybody will feel comfortable sharing their thoughts, feelings, concerns associated with the group process and ensuring that everyone is heard, that there's a buy-in from everyone. So there's content paraphrasing. So I'm understanding from the group that these are the particular issues of concern, that this is what we must do. So for the next meeting, we will ensure that we move forward by carrying out specific kinds of assignments so that we can report to each other at the subsequent meeting. So the group leader has the responsibility of making sure that the group is hearing what the goals are and the ways of moving forward in the group process. The group leader will either take notes or assign someone to take notes. And I think what's important here is to ensuring that all members are involved, because if the group leader takes over too many responsibilities, they will feel like the person in power, rather than there being this shared governance and shared responsibility. So it's really important that an effective group leader over a task or work group get all members involved and shares the responsibility, disseminates some of the tasks of the group so that everyone has a sense of buy-in and no one feels as though the group is being run or controlled by any one or two people. So the importance here is to involve group members to the extent that everyone feels this shared governance and that the goals of the group is collaboratively established. There are times when the leader must focus the group to pay attention to the task at hand. They might want to recap at the opening what occurred at the previous group. And as a therapist, one of the things I know as a therapist is you always want to start off by recapping. I remember at the last session we discussed XYZ. We had a very successful session. At the end of the session there was homework. And so you always want every therapist that is good. There's some basic skills that must take place. So at the beginning, opening up by recapping, by summarizing what occurred previously. And at the end of the session, you want to summarize what was discussed. And you also want to make sure that if there is a need for work to take place outside of or prior to the next meeting, that assignments are disseminated to the group members so that work can take place until the next session begins. I'm a firm believer that work in any group or in any therapeutic interaction, the work doesn't just take place when the person or persons are together. There's a lot of work that takes place when people are apart. So another good strategy is to always give your group members or your client or clients homework, whether it's having them think about certain things, whether it's a to-do list of things to get done, homework. It could be reading of information that's of particular importance, but recapping at the opening, summarizing at the end, giving homework, disseminating homework or tasks for the next meeting, all are critically important as it relates to minimizing conflict and moving the group forward in achieving its goals. Along the same lines with conflict, we know that some level of conflict is healthy. Sometimes when you have a homogeneous group and everybody's in agreement and they're functioning pretty synchronously, you find that members are less likely to challenge each other. They might feel that something isn't a good idea, they might have a better idea, they might want to ask certain questions, but they might choose not to because they want to preserve the status quo of the group or to preserve the relationship, if you will. But any good group, any healthy group has some level of conflict, some level of persons challenging each other, asking questions, being the devil's advocate, asking the tough questions, and helping each other to recognize that it's no disrespect intended, but through asking these difficult questions, it helps us to think things through critically, and it really advances the agenda of the group. So you want, at the very beginning, when you have a task or work group, you want to let them know that some level of questioning each other and asking the tough questions, playing the devil's advocate is really important for the health of the group and for challenging and overcoming some of the tough issues of the group. Group members in a task or work group should be encouraged to give their input. They should anticipate differences of opinion, and they should avoid switching topics or ending discussions when conflict arises. So teaching them sometimes to agree to disagree It's important for a good leader to say, well, Jim, I hear you're saying that XYZ is important. Martha, I hear you saying that these other issues are important. I want you both to understand that you're both on point. Both of these issues are extremely important. And that way you bring people together by validating and affirming both points of view. There are some times when you have to help people to understand that, what their suggestions are not the best, but you want to believe that the members of the group will have a tough skin and they can accept and appreciate when others might have a difference of opinion, particularly if it's for the overall good of the group. Along the same lines with conflict, we recognize that there are things that the leader should do. Just like there are things that group members should do, there are also things that an effective group leader should do. And one of those have to do with intervening when conflicts become personal or unproductive. So you might have to jump in there when the conflict seems to take a turn for the worse and it's unproductive. So by having ways of bringing people together, seeing similarities rather than differences, and helping to affirm that both sides are right and that there's a middle ground. So you have to have some problem-solving skills to be an effective leader, even when it comes to task or work groups. So it's important that when persons select group leaders, that they identify someone that could be someone to bridge a divide or a gap, rather than someone that may not feel comfortable with conflict and who might, rather than help to resolve differences and bring people together, they might, cause bigger problems because they might choose to end a meeting when it's becoming unproductive or there is conflicts that are arising, rather than helping people to work through their differences. Avoid leaving conflictual items until the end of the agenda. And so many times I've seen people that they know that something will be a conflictual item, and so they'll leave it till the end. And what's difficult about that is a meeting has a tendency to end on a sour note. So while you may not want to begin a meeting with a conflictual item or something that's kind of conflict oriented or has the potential to cause conflict at the end, you don't want to begin a meeting and you don't want to end a meeting on a conflictual note. So it's better to tag it in somewhere in the middle so that you can end the meeting on a high note where people have energy and they're feeling like they want to stick it out. They want to continue to work through and work on whatever the shared issues or tasks, or rather than saying to themselves at the end of the meeting, this is it, I'm out, let them do whatever they want, no longer involved. So be mindful not to put conflictual items at the end. And if you're a part of a group that this seems to happen, then you definitely want to address it. But what I will say is not everybody's comfortable with conflict. Some people have a lot of difficulty dealing with tense or controversial kinds of issues. And so the leader has to be mindful that this is a very important part of the job and can mean the difference between a successful group or a group that terminates prematurely without succeeding at the goals that have been identified. So you always want to use conflict resolution skills. Negotiation is really important. Effective listening is also important, helping people to hear each other's points of view, because a lot of times when conflicts arise, people stop hearing. So with using effective negotiation, mediation, or even arbitration, you have to use those conflict resolution skills. So what negotiation does is helping both sides to hear each other's points of view, where there's some give and take. Mediation is, people may not always agree They may not always get what they want, but at least helping them to hear the perspective. So one side may not give up anything because clearly their ideas or their position might be the better of the two, but at least facilitating this kind of discussion where each side can hear and understand and perhaps have a respectful difference of opinion so that the issue is resolved in a pro-social, productive kind of way. With arbitration, it's more the leader saying, well, unfortunately, we can't agree collectively, so I will have to decide. So that's when the leader will force or enforce a decision for the group rather than the group members identifying with what solution is best. So arbitration is more of this is what we will do, rather than mediation and negotiation where there's this shared sense of thoughts and feelings and compromise that might have to take place. That's negotiation, and mediation is just allowing both sides to hear each other's points of view, even though changes may not occur. So you always want to end meetings on a good note, and that helps to ensure that people will come back again. When the meeting ends on a bad note, it breeds a lot of frustration and contempt, and then you find people saying, you know what, I don't know if I want to continue to be a part of it. I think this is it for me. And so that's why it's important that if there are conflictual items or issues that are difficult to resolve, that you ensure that those items are in the middle of the agenda or toward the top of the agenda, not at the beginning, but certainly not at the end. We know that communication is most effective in everything that we do. So we recognize that communication and dialogue is very important. It is of utmost importance, and thus leaders should encourage and model good communication behaviors. So you want to avoid talking over others. You want to avoid interrupting. However, there are times when you must interrupt. Sometimes you might have members in a group that is very long-winded, and their comments, or they're very verbose and they can talk for 5 minutes without asking a question or allowing an interjection whatsoever. So in terms of a good leader and controlling the group, sometimes you must interrupt, and you might say to the person, Jim, you've made a lot of excellent comments. I really like the point you made about us coming together and resolving a particular problem so that we can get the most. But I'd like for us to open it up to other comments, because I could see that James was agreeing with some of the things that you were saying. So I'd like to get some other people involved in this discussion. So you want to do it in a way that you maybe limit the extent to which you have one or two people dominating the conversation, but you're also bringing other people in. So you want to do it in a respectful manner, so you want to be affirming, but you're also wanting to ensure that other persons within the group are able to share their thoughts and ideas as well, so that one person doesn't dominate. And you always want to use the I statement. Whenever you use the I statement, it is less defensive. People are less likely to take offense to I statements. So you might say, I'm hearing you say that, there are a lot of things that are important, but what's most important is that we focus on a particular item. So when you say I statements, you own it rather than you say, so Jim, I heard you say X, Y, Z. Well, no, Jim might say, I didn't say that. Well, I may have said it, but that's not exactly what I mean. And so I statements are the kinds of statements that minimize the extent to which persons will take offense or become defensive of something that is communicated, because you're owning, this is what I think. It may not be correct. It may not be what everyone is thinking or feeling, but this is my particular frame of reference. So I statements. See, these are suggestions that are important, irrespective of what your therapeutic, whether you're doing task or work groups, the psychoeducational, psychotherapy groups, even teaching our clients to use our I statements. It's very, very important. So leaders and communication, you want to, as a leader, beware of nonverbal communication. You know, people say certain things in words, but there's a lot of information that's conveyed by nonverbals. So people in agreement might be nodding their head, they might frown or roll their eyes, or, you know, they might squinch their face. So as a good leader, it's important to observe nonverbals. Just by observing, you know, what's going on within the group, you might discern that some people might become closed based upon certain things that are said. And so you want to ensure that you are paying attention to the other people within the group context. So paying attention to nonverbal skills or nonverbal communication. Avoid jargon. You know, for me, whenever people use certain kinds of jargon, like for example, they might say, the situation calls for certain kinds of actions. And so I'll say, when you say situation, tell me exactly what you mean. And so they'll explain what they mean when they say the situation calls for certain kinds of action. So I would want them to not only explain the situation, but when you say certain kinds of actions, unpack that a little bit for me. Help me to best understand the kinds of actions that are most important when a person does X, Y, Z. So you want to avoid jargon so that everybody is on the same page and understanding, because we all might arrive at different meanings if we don't unpack the jargon or get clarification of the jargon that's used. You want to always ensure that the group that you're working with, irrespective of the kind of group, whether it be task or work groups, psychoeducational, psychotherapy, you want to address issues that are racist, sexist, or homophobic in terms of language that's used by your members. It's important to ensure that members are respectful in what they say, because that is just the way it must be. We must be respectful. We must use language that is affirming and inclusive of others. And you want to use various forms of communication styles. So on the one hand, you might use discussions and discourse. Sometimes you might want to act things out in role plays. You might want to do experiential kinds of things where, you know, if you know you're going to meet with a particular board of directors, you might want to have some mock discussions or a role play of the meeting that you're preparing for, because those are some of the ways in which it helps to cement learning. Some people learn by listening. Some people learn by observing. For some people, you might have to also have things in writing, because some people learn through multiple styles or through multiple means or modes. And so it could be through action, through verbal communication, and it also can be in the form of written work. So just be mindful that there are various styles of communication, and whenever there's a group with 2 or more people, you want to attend to the various styles of communication. We know that cohesion is extremely important, and it is really the foundation of any type of group work. So in any group context, we know that cohesion is to group therapy as the relationship is to individual therapy. So you want to make sure that there is a sense of relationship, rapport among the members of the group. So you want to facilitate a sense of belonging, a sense of involvement among the group members in the activities. So that's especially why issues related to cohesion, shared governance, this shared collaborative relationship as it relates to the goals and the expectations. These issues are all very important when you want to ensure that cohesiveness is paramount to the group. Where there is no cohesiveness, the likelihood of being effective or as effective is minimized and sometimes non-existent. You want to ensure and encourage interaction among group members. Sometimes you might have members that are shy, that might feel intimidated, or might feel that they might scrutinize everything they say before they say it. But you want to encourage your members to share their thoughts and their to be involved and interactive, because the richness of what comes out of the group is predicated on individuals within the group that's willing to be involved. And so you want to encourage involvement. Say, sometimes you call on people, say, Janice, I haven't heard from you. I really value knowing what you think because I know you have something critical to add here. So you want to affirm that every person is an important member of the group and you value hearing from each individual. And so in so doing, you're encouraging people to feel like it's important that everybody has a voice and is heard and is a part of the group process. And that really serves to enhance the level of cohesion that exists in the group, and it maximizes what comes out of the group. So it maximizes the extent to which the goals are accomplished. You want to include everyone, no matter how small the task. Everybody in the group has gifts and talents and something to share. So no matter how small, you want everyone to be involved, whether it means setting up the room, taking down the room, taking the notes, starting the coffee, making sure the coffee's available, doing the count of persons that are in support of or not in support of, ensuring that every person in the group is involved. Again, no matter how small the task, you definitely want to facilitate the involvement. So as it relates to the cohesion and the leader wants to minimize cliques and fractions. And inevitably, when humans get together, they will also always try and identify someone in the group process with whom they feel a sense of connectedness or a sense of relationship with. But an effective leader will try and minimize the extent to which there are cliques or fractions, because that minimizes the extent to which the group will do the best work. What happens is the group becomes splintered. And if you want to avoid the splintering or the fractions that exist, you want, to the best of your ability, to minimize the cliques. And sometimes it might entail group work. So if you find that the same group of people always are in the same groups, if they're having to do little mini subcommittee work or subgroup work, then mix it up. Say, we're going to switch things up so that we could work collaboratively with different people in the group. So this time we'll count off. So everyone who says the number 1 is in one group, number 2s are in a different group. So you allow people to develop a working relationship with those with whom they may not feel as close to. And so that's one of the ways to minimize cliques and fractions. Groups too connected experience groupthink, where everybody in the group think alike. It's homogeneous in terms of their thinking. And we know that whenever there's groupthink, and groupthink is when everybody in the group is thinking alike, thinking along the same lines, because nobody's challenging anyone. There is no healthy conflict. Everybody's going along with the program. It minimizes the extent to which you have expanded the potential of the group. So while a certain level of harmony in a group is good, you want to avoid that sense of connectedness to the extent that everybody's thinking alike. Nobody wants to differ. Nobody wants to challenge anyone or be the devil's advocate. Everybody wants to go along with the grain. And so that isn't a good thing when you want to maximize the extent to which your group will be productive. You want to encourage and model the benefits of working cooperatively instead of competitively. So you don't want members of the group competing with each other, trying to outshine each other, but you definitely want to encourage that collaborative spirit. You want to encourage and model cohesiveness, because we know the essence of a group, of any group work, whether it be task, psychoeducational, or psychotherapy group, has to do with shared governance, cohesion, the collaborative nature of the group. So you want to encourage and model the benefits of such. You want to frequently recognize and praise members' commitment and contributions. Just like in other forms of group where you want to take the time to affirm the contributions of others, you want to make sure that you find opportunities to recognize and affirm all members for their contributions, so that people don't believe that there are pets or some persons of the group are more important or valued than others. So while this week you might focus on affirming or recognizing certain members for certain things that are evident, you don't want it to appear as though you're giving compliments where they're not merited, but you always also want to make sure that people don't perceive you to have certain pets or certain favorites. So in so doing, you want to find ways of affirming and recognizing all members for their commitment and contributions, because it's through that commitment, contribution, and collaborative spirit that the group is able to achieve its goals that are established collaboratively. So along the same lines of cohesion, there is consensus that is very important in the group process. And so that is the fifth and final C in the 5 C's of group work, particularly as it relates to task and work group. And consensus suggests that members of the group can agree on a particular outcome. As we said before, we don't want all members of the group to have group think where everybody's thinking alike. No one wants to challenge the others. Everybody wants to maintain the status quo. Nobody wants to play the devil's advocate. We know that in consensus, with consensus, that is also very important. So in advance, group members must arrive at how they will arrive at a final decision. Do they want 100% agreement, or will 75% of the members agreeing be sufficient? So what might happen is you may start off with there being a big difference of opinion, and so you're giving both sides an opportunity to hear and be heard and to explore things really critically. Sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you will not get 100% agreement, because sometimes people will not concede. And so I think to have 100% consensus is not necessarily the ideal. But for the group, at the beginning, when you're establishing the goals collaboratively, you want to decide, before things are even ever brought to a vote, do we want to ensure that we have 100% unanimous decisions, or would 75% be acceptable? Or would 60% or 65%? Some people, if it's not by a substantial margin, some group members or groups believe that, well, you know what, we need to go back to the drawing board if it's not at least 75%. If it's 65%, it's too divisive or divisive. So they might want there to be more shared agreement among group members before moving forward if there's not a certain percentage of agreement or buy-in. But the ideal time to assess this level of consensus or decision making is at the beginning rather than at the end. And an effective group leader, in knowing when you're challenging very tough issues in your task or work group, you might want to decide from the very beginning, do we want to decide by the raising of the hand, by a secret ballot or voice votes? And I think it has to do with the contentiousness of the issue. So it allows persons to give their vote and speak their mind honestly without others knowing how they voted. So it might be agreed upon that in certain instances, a voice vote or hand raising may be appropriate. However, there are some issues that might be of certain significance that you want a secret ballot so that people can feel comfortable voting their true thoughts or feelings without knowing that others would see and judge them or hold them accountable based upon their votes. So as the leader, you have to make those tough decisions. Being a leader isn't easy, even in a task or work group. But for the good of the group, you have to recognize what is of utmost importance, and irrespective of the fact that some members may not like it, as a group leader, you have to be able to make the tough decisions. So sometimes the extent to which consensus is achieved might vary depending on the group size. So if it's a 5-person group, 3 versus 2, inevitably there's always a tiebreaker unless one person abstains. But the extent to which consensus is achieved is really predicated on the size of the group. As it relates to the leader and consensus building, it's a process that varies depending on the group's objectives as well as the group members and the membership. And so I always think it's important to figure out issues related to how votes will be taken, whether it'll be 100% decision making or 75% or whatever the number is. It's always better when decisions are made beforehand rather than after the fact, because when decisions are made after the fact, they're more emotionally latent and people are more likely to become upset rather than if when you're at the phase of establishing goals collaboratively, if there's that shared governance among members where goals are established collaboratively. And when that critical time comes where you have to execute what was implemented, it's far easier to do so. So that concludes our discussion on task and work groups, which it really has centered around the 5 C's of task and work groups. But I want you to keep in mind that everything that we have discussed regarding the 5 C's are of paramount importance, irrespective of what kind of group you have. But for the purpose of discussing task and work groups, I want you to pay particular attention to all 5 C's because, as stated in your slide, the 5 C's can make or break a task group experience as well as the outcome and the goals that are sought to achieve. So thank you for your attention, and I hope you find this information helpful.